The flight attendant's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm going to ask you one last time. Move to the back off the plane, or I will call security." Her words carried a sharp edge, her tone dripping with condescension. Naomi, the black woman, calm as ever, looked up. "Ether, I've already told you I'm not moving," she said simply. Her tone was even almost soothing, but it held an undeniable strength. She was humiliated in front of everyone, but no one expected. What would happen next when the woman they thought was powerless stood up and revealed who she really was? As we delve the story, if you believe everyone should be treated with respect, no matter what their color is, click the subscribe button now and tell us where you are watching from. Among the passengers filing in was Naomi Williams. She was in her late 30s, dressed in a tailored navy blazer and slacks that fit her with understated precision. Her hair was neatly styled, her posture effortlessly upright. And though she wore no ostentatious jewelry, something about her presence seemed to command quiet attention. She moved with measured grace, her gaze calm and steady, a woman who needed no fanfare to make an impression. Naomi did not seek attention, nor did she shrink from it. She simply occupied space with the assurance of someone who knew her own worth. What no one in the cabin yet knew was that Naomi's destination was not a holiday or a short business errand. She was traveling to oversee a growing empire, one they had built carefully and quietly. The plane, though lavish, was not just another vessel to her. It was part of something she owned. But she preferred anonymity. She preferred to observe how people treated her when they thought she was simply another passenger. At the entrance stood Lauren Reed, the lead flight attendant. She was in her early 40s, her uniform immaculate, every strand of her blonde hair locked into place with an almost military precision. Her smile was polished, her voice smooth, her posture commanding. To most passengers, she appeared the very image of professionalism. Yet beneath that veneer, Lauren carried something sharp, an instinct to measure people, to assign worth through appearances. She offered warm greetings to those she considered worthy, and cooler, dismissive tones to those who did not meet her silent standards. When the Raymonds boarded, Lauren's smile brightened as though she had found old friends. Mr. Raymond, in his 60s, carried a folded newspaper, his expression calm and mildly curious. His wife, her knitting bag clutched firmly in her lap, looked eager to begin her craft the moment she sat down. Lauren leaned toward them, her voice dripping with warmth. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. Always a pleasure to see you again. Can I bring you something before we take off?" Mrs. Raymond shook her head politely, already absorbed in her yarn, while her husband gave a small nod toward his coffee cup. Lauren's attention lingered on them, her smile genuine, before she moved down the aisle. Then came Naomi. Lauren's eyes flicked over her outfit. Professional. Yes, but not flashy, not dripping in luxury brands that screamed money. There was something about Naomi's quiet composure that unsettled her. Lauren's voice, which had flowed warmly for the Raymonds, cooled instantly. "Welcome aboard," she said. Her tone clipped. The warmth evaporated. Naomi met her gaze calmly, offered a small nod, and moved toward her seat without comment. But she always noticed, behind Naomi. Other passengers took their seats, a woman with a coiffed hairstyle and designer sunglasses, who looked like she had stepped out of a glossy magazine spread, and a businessman in a crisp gray suit, his eyes sharp but kind, scanning the cabin with a quiet curiosity. The socialite leaned toward her companion, whispering as if eager to find drama before the plane even took off. Naomi settled into her seat near the front. She placed her small carry-on neatly beneath her chair, folded her hands on her lap, and drew in a slow breath. To any observer, she looked serene, almost detached, but behind her eyes, she registered every detail, the contrast in tone, the quick glances, the way Lauren's smile flickered only for certain faces. It was a script Naomi had seen countless times in different forms, and she already knew where it could lead. Lauren, meanwhile, lingered near the aisle. Something about Naomi gnawed at her. The woman's calm, her refusal to shrink, her lack of nervousness despite being treated coldly, it irritated her in ways she could not articulate. To Lauren, appearances were everything, and Naomi did not look like the sort of woman who belonged at the front of this plane. That small seed of assumption began to fester. Lauren approached, her smile tight. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, Her voice dipped in condescension. "I think you may be in the wrong section." Naomi looked up, her expression unreadable. "I believe this is my seat," she replied, her tone level. Lauren's lips curved into a polite smile that carried no warmth. "This section is reserved for our elite passengers." Nearby, the socialite tilted her head, clearly eavesdropping, while the businessman frowned slightly. Attention sparked in the air, like static before a storm. "You might want to your list," Naomi said calmly. Lauren's brows rose, her irritation flashing through the practiced mask. "I don't need to check anything," she snapped softly. "I know who belongs here and who doesn't." Naomi held her gaze without flinching. "Then you may be mistaken." The quiet exchange drew attention. A few passengers pretended not to notice, their eyes glued to devices, but their ears tilted toward the conversation. Others whispered, curiosity piqued. Lauren straightened, her posture sharp. "If you don't move to the back, I will have to call security." Her voice carried now, sharp enough that other passengers could not miss it. Naomi's calm expression did not falter. "Call whoever you need," she said. "But I am not moving." The words dropped into the cabin like stones into water, rippling through every seat. Passengers exchanged glances, some muttering. One man shook his head. "She's probably trying to sneak a free upgrade," he whispered. Lauren seized on the remark. "Exactly," she said, folding her arms. "Some people don't respect the rules." Naomi did not rise to the bait. She simply leaned back slightly, her gaze steady, as if watching a performance she had seen too many times before. Grace, the junior flight attendant, shifted nervously nearby. She had been silent, but her eyes betrayed conflict. She wanted to say something, to check the passenger list as Naomi suggested, but Lauren's sharp stare kept her frozen. Her fingers twitched toward the clipboard clipped near the cockpit, but fear of reprimand held her in place. The businessman finally leaned forward. "From where I'm sitting," he said calmly, "it seems you are the one causing a scene." Lauren's face flushed. She snapped back. "Sir, I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage the disturbance." But Naomi simply turned toward the businessman, her voice soft. "I'm fine, thank you." The power in her calmness was subtle, but undeniable. Lauren's irritation only deepened as she moved briskly down the aisle. She carried herself with a sharpness that betrayed her anger, her polished shoes clicking against the carpeted floor. She delivered drinks to the Raymonds with a practiced smile, offered champagne to the socialite with warmth, and poured water for passengers in the back row. Yet when she passed Naomi's seat, she acted as though she were invisible. Naomi remained, patient, though her lips tightened slightly. She had asked for nothing, demanded nothing, and yet the deliberate avoidance was glaring. She waited quietly until Lauren passed by once more. Tray still half full. "Excuse me," Naomi said, her tone steady. "May I have some water, please?" Lauren turned her head slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I will get to you when I can," she said curtly, before moving on without pause. The businessman frowned, shifting in his seat, and even the socialite glanced uneasily at her companion. It was not subtle anymore. The difference in treatment was obvious. Minutes ticked by. Naomi adjusted her position, crossing one leg slightly into the aisle in a natural movement. It was unremarkable until Lauren returned with her tray. Instead of asking Naomi to move, she deliberately altered her path. Her heel struck Naomi's shin sharply, the tray tilted, and water spilled across Naomi's trousers in a sudden splash. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Lauren's voice rang out dramatically. "Watch where you put your legs," she snapped. "You have caused a mess." Passengers craned their necks, startled. Naomi brushed calmly at her wet clothing, her expression steady. "You walked into me," she said softly. Lauren's voice rose, sharp enough to echo across the cabin. "Perhaps if you knew how to sit properly, we would not be dealing with this." Naomi tilted her head slightly, her gaze unwavering. "All I have asked," she said, her voice still calm, "is to be treated with the same respect as everyone else. If that is too much to ask, then perhaps you are the one who does not belong here." The words cut through the air like glass. For the first time, Lauren faltered. Anger flared across her features, and in that split second, she acted without thought. She raised her hand and struck Naomi sharply across the face. The sound cracked through the cabin like thunder. passengers gasped aloud. The businessman half from his seat, his jaw clenched in fury. Grace pressed both hands over her mouth, horror etched across her face. Even the socialite, who had been smirking before, turned pale. Her wide eyes reflecting shock, Naomi straightened slowly in her seat. She did not touch her face. She did not cry out. She simply sat taller, her hands resting gently in her lap, and looked directly at Lauren. Her expression was unchanged, but her eyes carried a weight so heavy that Lauren flinched beneath it. "You just made the worst mistake of your life," Naomi said quietly. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the engines. Lauren's hands trembled slightly, but her pride forced her voice out. "You have been disruptive since the moment you boarded this plane," she snapped. "You are the problem here, not me." Naomi did not flinch. Her voice remained even, every word deliberate. "You struck a passenger in front of witnesses. That is not discipline, that is assault." The businessman's voice cut through the heavy air. "She is right," he said firmly. "I saw everything." Others nodded, whispers spreading like wildfire. The Raymonds looked on disapprovingly. Mrs. Raymond's knitting needles paused mid-stitch, her lips pressed tight. Even the socialite murmured to her companion, shaking her head now with disbelief. Lauren's mask was cracking. Her anger still simmered, but behind it, fear was creeping in. She turned away abruptly, storming toward the galley as if to regain control. But the weight of Naomi's words lingered, pressing down on her dot. Grace stood frozen, her knuckles white as she gripped the passenger list. She knew she should intervene, but her fear of Lauren's authority kept her silent. Still, her eyes flicked toward Naomi with something that looked like quiet solidarity. Naomi, meanwhile, reached calmly for her phone. She typed a brief message with deliberate precision, then set the device on the armrest. She leaned back, her posture still impeccable, her expression serene. She had no need to shout, no need to argue further. Into place for a game Lauren could not win. When the cockpit door opened, the cabin shifted again. The pilot stepped out, his face pale, his jaw tight. He scanned the scene quickly, his eyes moving from Naomi's calm figure to Lauren's rigid stance. "Lauren," he said sharply, his voice carrying the authority of command. "Step aside," she blinked, startled. "Excuse me? I am handling this situation." His voice was firmer now, carrying the weight of something larger than his own authority. "I just received a call from management. The owner of this plane is on board, Miss Williams." He gestured toward Naomi. The words struck like lightning, rippled through the cabin. The socialite audibly inhaled, clutching her pearls. The businessman's expression softened into something that looked like quiet recognition. Grace's lips parted, relief rushing across her features as the truth landed. Lauren, however, went pale. That cannot be true," she stammered. But there was no mistake. Naomi stood slowly, her movements graceful, controlled. She adjusted her blazer, her eyes sweeping across the stunned passengers before settling firmly on Lauren. "My name is Naomi Williams," she said. Her voice carried effortlessly, clear and steady. "I am the owner of this plane, and more than that, I own this airline." The silence that followed was absolute. Lauren's mouth opened, then closed, her face crumpling into disbelief. Naomi's gaze did not waver. "Lauren," she said, her voice calm but sharp as steel, "your behavior today has been disgraceful. You humiliated yourself, mistreated a passenger, and tarnished the reputation of the company I have built." Lauren's lips trembled. I didn't know." "You did not know," Naomi replied, raising a hand to silence her, "because you did not care to treat me or anyone else with the respect that every human being deserves." Passengers began to murmur, nodding in agreement. The businessman folded his arms, his expression firm. Mrs. Raymond looked up from her knitting and gave a small, approving nod. Even the socialite, previously amused by the conflict, whispered to her companion with a tone of shame. Naomi's words fell like judgment. "Instead of courtesy, you made assumptions. Instead of professionalism, you chose prejudice." Lauren stepped back, her face draining of color, but the pilot blocked her retreat. His expression was grim, unyielding. "You are unfit for this position," Naomi continued, her tone cutting through the heavy silence. "Effective immediately, you are dismissed." Lauren's eyes widened, panic flooding in. Please, Miss Williams, she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't mean— Naomi's gaze hardened. You did not mean to be caught. But you were— At that moment, 2 uniformed officers entered the cabin, summoned during the unscheduled landing. Their presence was solid, undeniable, the law in physical form. One stepped forward. Miss Williams, we received your report. Do you wish to press charges? Naomi's answer was firm. Yes. She struck me in front of witnesses. She will be held accountable. Desperate. Wait, this is a misunderstanding. Please, the officer produced handcuffs. Ma'am, you are under arrest for assault. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Passengers stared in silence as Lauren's hands were pulled behind her back, the clink of metal echoing louder than any argument she could have made. Her eyes filled with tears as she pleaded, Miss Williams, I am sorry. Please, I was wrong. Naomi did not soften. Her expression was calm, her voice even. Now you face the consequences. The once dominant flight attendant, reduced to trembling desperation, was led down the aisle. Her shoulders hunched, her face streaked with tears. She disappeared through the exit. Silence followed her. Heavy and final dot, Naomi turned back to the cabin, her voice steady, her gaze meeting the eyes of the passengers. I apologize for what you have had to witness today. This is not the standard of service I expect from my airline. Moving forward, I will ensure that every passenger is treated with dignity and respect. Applause broke out, scattered at first, then swelling into a wave. The businessman clapped firmly. Mrs. Raymond laid aside her knitting to join, and even the socialite cheered, her earlier judgment replaced by admiration. Grace's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were of relief. Naomi turned to her, her voice softening. I noticed your professionalism today, even when it was not easy. Thank you. You will hear from my office about a promotion. Grace's lips parted in shock, gratitude flooding her face. Thank you, Miss Williams. Naomi gave her a small smile before turning toward the exit. Her assistants ready to escort her into the waiting black SUV. The atmosphere of the plane had shifted, and quiet awe. Naomi had not only reclaimed her dignity, but had set an example, one no one on that flight would ever forget. The cabin slowly settled into a hush after Lauren's removal. The applause tapered off, leaving behind the quiet hum of the engines. And the weight of what had just occurred. Passengers exchanged murmurs, their faces still etched with awe. Naomi, however, remained composed. She adjusted her blazer with calm precision, her expression serene, her authority unshaken. She walked down the aisle with deliberate grace, each step echoing the quiet shift of power that had taken place. With admiration, Mr. Raymond folded his newspaper neatly and gave her a respectful nod, while his wife set her knitting aside to clap once more, softly but firmly. The businessman, who had defended her earlier, met her eyes and gave the smallest of approving smiles. Even the socialite, who had once whispered judgment, leaned toward her companion and whispered instead, She's extraordinary, Naomi acknowledged. Them all with a single composed glance before stepping off the plane. The moment her shoes touched the tarmac, the fresh air of the runway greeted her. A sleek black SUV waited nearby, its driver standing stiffly at attention. The door already open. 2 assistants, dressed immaculately, approached with brisk, purposeful strides. Miss Williams is prepared for your next engagement. Are you comfortable proceeding now? Naomi gave a small nod. Yes, let us move forward. As she settled into the car, her mind was not on the meeting ahead, but on the incident she had just endured. Had faced humiliation not because of her wealth or power, but because she had been reduced, in Lauren's eyes, to an assumption. It was not the first time Naomi had faced such treatment. Yet today, she had transformed the insult into a lesson, not only for Lauren, but for every witness in that cabin, and soon for the world. By evening, footage from passengers' phones had spread like wildfire across social media. Clips showed Naomi sitting calm and unwavering while Lauren berated her, followed by the shocking moment of the slap. Then came the reveal, Naomi standing tall, declaring herself the owner of the airline with quiet authority. Hashtag surged, hashtag respect above all, hashtag Naomi Williams. Hashtag dignity first. News anchors recounted the event with stunned tones. Editorials appeared within hours. Commentators dissected every frame of the footage: the businessman's defense, Grace's hesitation, the Raymond's approval, the socialite's change of heart. Lauren's downfall was held as a cautionary tale. That night, Naomi sat in a sleek studio under bright lights for a televised interview. She was poised as ever, her navy blazer replaced with a cream suit that glowed against the backdrop. The interviewer leaned forward, visibly captivated. "Miss Williams," he began, "your story has gone viral. Millions have seen how you handled the situation. What message do you want to send to those watching?" Naomi's gaze was steady, her voice clear. Respect is not a privilege granted. To some, it is a right owed to all. Dignity must never depend on wealth, appearance, or assumptions. True leadership is measured not by the power you wield, but by the standard you uphold for others. The interviewer nodded slowly, visibly moved. "And what would you say to those who face similar challenges, but do not have the platform you do?" Naomi's expression softened. "Strength comes from within, even when you feel invisible. Remember your worth. You do not need a title or a fortune to demand respect. Sometimes standing firm in who you are is the greatest act of power." The interview ended to thunderous applause in the studio, but Naomi did not linger to bask in praise. For her, the point was not the spotlight. It was the change that might ripple outward. Weeks later, Naomi stood in the boardroom of her airline headquarters. Executives and senior staff filled the polished wooden table, their expressions attentive but tense. Naomi was not a leader who raised her voice. She did not need to. Her authority came from the clarity of her vision. What happened on that flight, she said, her voice even, was not an isolated incident. It was the symptom of a culture that allows assumptions and prejudice to take root. That ends today. She outlined new policies with deliberate precision, mandatory training on dignity and cultural respect for all staff, anonymous passenger feedback systems, strict protocols for handling disputes, and consequences for any employee who failed. To uphold the core value she now placed at the heart of the company, respect above all, executives exchanged glances. But no one dared object. They had seen the footage. They had seen the world's reaction. They knew Naomi was not merely making symbolic changes. She was reshaping the soul of her airline. Grace, the junior attendant from that fateful flight, was promoted within weeks. She received a personal call from Naomi herself, thanking her for her quiet courage and offering her a path forward. Grace's gratitude was immeasurable, but more than that, she carried Naomi's lesson with her. Professionalism was not about fear of authority, but about upholding dignity, even when it was difficult. Not long after, Naomi boarded another plane. This time, the energy was different from the moment she stepped through the door. The lead flight attendant greeted her with a warm, genuine smile, the kind reserved not for an owner, but for a respected guest. "Welcome aboard, Miss Williams. It is an honor to have you with us." Naomi inclined her head, returning the smile. She moved to her seat and settled with the same calm grace as always, but she felt the difference immediately. The cabin staff moved with attentiveness, not fear, but sincerity. Passengers were addressed with courtesy, regardless of their attire or demeanor. The atmosphere was lighter, more humane, as the engines roared to life and the runway blurred past the window. Naomi gazed at the horizon. A quiet peace washed over her. The incident had been painful, humiliating in the moment, but it had birthed something greater, a standard that would outlast her presence on any single flight. Later, in a public statement, Naomi addressed the world. Directly, her words were simple, but they resonated across screens and hearts alike. "Luxury is not defined by appearances," she said in the broadcast, her voice steady, her presence commanding. "It is defined by the experience we create for one another. True success is measured not by what you can afford, but by how you treat those around you. This is why I am implementing policies to ensure every passenger on every plane is valued. Dignity is not optional, it is the standard." Her statement was replayed countless times, quoted in newspapers, debated in classrooms, and celebrated across social media. For many, Naomi's stand became more than just a viral moment. It became a symbol of the quiet but unstoppable strength of those who refused to bow to prejudice. Naomi herself did not linger in the glow of her newfound fame. She returned to her work, to her empire, to the steady building of something larger than one person or one story. Yet she carried the memory of that flight, not as a wound, but as a reminder. The world would remember the slap, the reveal, downfall of Lauren Reed. But Naomi would remember the quiet lesson beneath it all, that the most powerful victories are not always about winning. Sometimes they're about inspiring change. She smiled faintly as the plane carried her higher into the sky. Beyond the clouds lay a future she was determined to shape, one where respect was not granted to a chosen few, but given freely to all. And with that, Naomi Williams leaned back against her seat, serene as ever, ready for the journey ahead.